What is going on, guys? Back here in my shop. Today, we're gonna talk about joints. These kinds of joints. Let's talk about it. So there are literally a ton of different joints, right? Different ways to join up wood. These are butt joints. We have miter joints, all the way up to the dovetail, lap joints, rabbets, mortise and tenons. All these kinds of ways of joining wood and jointery are very, very popular and very common. Today we're gonna go through and we're gonna build each one. And I'm gonna show you guys my favorite joints. Let's actually go through and do it. Okay, now what makes joints strong themselves isn't necessarily the screws or really even the wood. It's more of the placement and where you put the glue. Wood glue is probably the most important point in jointery. I use Type-On 2, there's also Type-On 1, Type-On 3, there's also Gorilla Glue, all different types of wood glue. You can watch literally loads of videos trying to tell you which one's the best one. I love Project Farm, I think he's fantastic. He actually recommended the Elmer's wood glue as the best. Type-On 2 though kind of wins, and it's always been the one I've used. So the first joint we're gonna go through and do is the lap joint. Very basic, very simple. It's just two boards lapped upon each other. The reason why this one is the strongest is because of the face-to-face contact. The end of the boards are like little straws, and they have a tendency to suck in the glue. While this could be a good thing when it comes to staining or preserving wood, it's a bad thing when you have to actually use the wood in any sort of jointing combo or something. So there we go, we put one. Probably want to put another one just to really make sure we got full contact with the glue. You know it's good when we have adequate squeeze out with the glue right there and on the front. So that one is set. That is a lap joint. It is going to dry. And we're gonna move on to the next joint, a butt joint. Now in order to fully understand butt joints, we're gonna have to understand how lumber itself works. This is called the face of a board. These are edges or the side of the board, but that's not really what it's called. This is the face or the front, or some people even call this the side of the board. I don't know. It is that long, flat piece that is the face of the board. You have an edge, then you have an ends right here. Ends where you can see that grain. That's where we want to stay away from. End-to-end gluing is not very strong because of that straw effect I was talking about earlier. So a butt joint is any sort of joining of the wood where either an edge or face, edge to end, whatever is butted up next to each other. It's not overlapped, it's butted up. So in order to do this one, I am going to butt up like this and make kind of an L shape. I'm probably gonna do it right on this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a little bit of glue. Here is my trick, by the way, for gluing end grains. It doesn't really, I mean, it helps a lot, but it's not super good. What you do is you rub the glue around on the end grain, you give it a couple minutes, and you let it kind of soak in, then you add some more to it. So we're gonna give it a couple minutes right now. Okay, we gave it a few minutes. You can see it's starting to, I mean, I really can't see, but it's starting to kind of bubble up and soak into the end grain. So we're gonna add a little bit more. Then on this one, I'm going to actually put some nails on to hold it into place. So what I do is I set this guy up right here, hold it with one hand. So the nail is acting like a clamp in this. So you see this side has adequate squeeze out, but the other side does not. So let's, and there we go. So we probably should put one more right in the middle, but I'm gonna kind of move this squeeze out around. And there we go, we just made a butt joint. These two joints, the lap and the butt, require almost no tools. I'm not using a clamp because the screw or the nail is actually going to do the clamping on this one. Okay, let's move on to a little bit more of a complicated one. But in order to introduce that complicated one, I need to introduce different ways that we can make that complicated joint work. So over here, I have a couple different clamps. These are all variations of right angle clamps. This is one, you put the boards in here, clamp it down, call it good to go. This is another one that has like a through pass, so you can put the boards through, I guess. This one is kind of new. I didn't know these existed, but they're kind of cool. These are strap clamps. So you put the box you're gluing up in these straps, you clamp it down or pull the straps down, and boom, you have a clamp. You're clamping up that box. Pretty cool. In order to do the miter, you need to use a miter saw to actually make those miters. So a miter has a very distinct V shape that is cut out of it, right? And that's really popular for building up door frames, picture frames, that sort of thing. Let's make this right now. Okay, I'm here at my miter saw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move my miter saw to 45 degrees. Be careful. Some miter saws don't automatically lock at 45 degrees. They lock at about 46 degrees. It's really handy with framing, like roofing and stuff and studs. You want to make sure it's exactly at 45 and lock it into place. Then we want to hold against the fence and make our cut. Maybe do a little pass, make sure it's not going to hit your hand. And you want to slowly make your cut. Here we go. Okay, one, done. Awesome. Let's do the next one. Same thing, just right on the edge. Obviously, if I was making this right out of a regular board, I would already mark where it needs to go, certain things. But in this one, we're just, you know, doing this for educational purposes. Here we go, second one. Beautiful, now we have a miter. Look at that, perfect. Let's glue it up. Okay, I have to say, I've never actually used these clamps before, so I wouldn't necessarily know how it works, but we're gonna try it right now. So, a little bit of glue. We're kind of at the end joint, so we're gonna glue both sides just to give it the most possible surface area. So one side's glued. Let's get the other side done. The other side is glued. I press those together. Then I'm gonna let these kind of just sit right here. Some people like to tape the ends of their miter joints to kind of make it fold together. I do also like to do that. So what they do is they take some tape, put it right there, and then fold the tape over, and that's how they hold it into place. I also like that method, but for this video, we're just going to try out these clamps. They should work all right, but we're gonna see how it goes. We're gonna do that one. Now on the Bessie clamps, you just place it right on that 90 degree and press those 45s together. I honestly don't know how it's gonna work, but we're gonna see here. Oh, looks like I have a little bit of slippage going on. Okay, I gotta flip these boards around. These boards have a little bit of wane on them, so they want to constantly pull. So, well, these are kind of chilling in there. That doesn't look horribly bad, I guess. It's probably not meant for this type of like glue up because there's no real pressure actually holding the joints together. And I think that's where I'm having a little bit of an issue on this particular one, is that there's no pressure holding these joints together. Let me see if I can. So I just pressed this together as hard as I could and got adequate squeeze out. So we're gonna leave this, see how it goes. Okay, so that required a tool for sure. Let's move on to something else that also requires some tools that you may have. Now, I'm gonna show you a couple different ways you can make these cheaply, I guess. Now, a dado, rabbit, and double rabbit are cut using a dado stack out of the table saw. Now, if you have a table saw, you don't necessarily need a dado stack. It does make it quite nice, but you can just run it back and forth constantly with one blade and slowly cut it out and you'll be fine. But this is what I do to make these cuts. Now over here I have my router table. I have a 3/4 inch bit in here, and that's actually how thick this board is. So this gives me decently good dados, right? And all a dado is just the board is going to sit in the middle of whatever kind of stack you're cutting. So we're going to cut a dado right in the center of this. And the way I do this is I set both sides. We're gonna go at 2.5 inches. Put the guard, I think the guard's gonna be a little bit in the way. So I'm gonna go out just a hair, just to make sure I don't clip my finger, because that's not gonna be a great subject for video. Let's go like this, and let's go across. So we turn this on, it's spinning. there we go. Looks like we have a nice, perfect dado. Let's grab our piece of wood. It's a little tight, but that's exactly how we want that joint. And boom, there we go. We got a dado. We're gonna go back, we're gonna glue this up. But first, since I'm here, I might as well cut out a rabbet as well. The rabbet is a dado essentially at the end of a board. So what I like to do is remove your safety. I'll take my blade and I like to just put it right on the edge of that board. Now it looks like we're gonna have a little bit of an overhang, but that's okay. We can always sand that out. That's not a horrible one. Or cut it up. So we got that. Okay, well what about that double rabbet that you were seeing? A double rabbet is half of a rabbet and half of a rabbet on the other board, so it kind of fits together. So what we would do is open this up a little bit wider. Open that up a little bit wider. Okay, we're gonna try it out now. I think that's okay, it looks all right. Let's do the other one. And look at that. Well, that has a little bit of wane on that side, so let's so that is a decent fit. A little bit of glue. There we go. A little bit of glue, a little bit of screws, be held up perfectly well. Another way you can get around it, I didn't switch out the bit, but I could have switched out the bit to about a 1/2 or 1/4 inch, and maybe even 5/8, and I would get a much easier cut without having to do all those adjustments. But that is essentially how you guys would make those two. Let's go back, glue them up real quick, and talk about the next couple different ones. So as I'm gluing these up, I want to talk about the importance of jointery and why, you know, woodworkers and carpenters care so much about joining. It's really an art form. The way I do jointery really isn't going to be as kosher or as what people like, because I typically do it with non-traditional tools. The next one I'm going to do is probably one of the, or next two I should say, are probably one of the more, I guess, sought after. The one I'm going to do next is probably one of the more sought after or kind of judged upon kind of joints. These are called dovetails and mortise and tenon joints. All very particular. A lot of people take great pride in how they cut out their dovetails, how they cut out their mortises and tenons. Me, I'm just a simple carpenter. I don't really do too much when it comes down to fancy woodworking joints when I build furniture. I do basic stronghold joints. These ones look very nice. They're also very strong in their own respect. I just don't necessarily go through the detail of doing those types of joints. But it still works nonetheless. So let me glue up this last dado and we'll move on to the more particular, or I should say exciting joint. But till then, you guys are still learning. Now, this is a mortise and tenon. Here's the mortise, which has a slot cut out from the inside, and here's a tenon, which has a tenon cut out from the wood. Setup is probably the most important part from a mortise and tenon. So when it comes down to actually doing setup, I really need to be mindful of where I'm placing my mortise and where I'm placing my tenon. So what I do is I mark the spot where the mortise and tenon need to go. And I already know how deep I want my mortise to be, so I draw a little line. Now, some people with mortise and tenon have a special jig that they use. I kind of eyeball it, which doesn't give me the best result, but it's also able to be pretty helpful. So what I do is I mark over, and right in the center of this piece of wood, that is where I'm going to do my mark. But I'm missing one tool. Let me go grab that. Okay, so I got my 3/8 inch chisel, and I'm going to kind of go gently and kind of mark where I want the mortise to go. So I'm going to slowly cut it out. I'm probably going to speed this process up. So I'm just carving away. Use the hammer, kind of tap, carve. Hammer, tap, and carve. All I want to do. So I'm going to keep carving until I reach the most perfect spot and depth that I want. Almost there. There we are. We have our mortise. Now, let me cut out our tenon. Similar way, all I need is a coping saw. Okay, I made my marks just very similar to this guy. Made my marks for the tenon. So I'm going to use my coping saw. Now, once we finally get to the actual tenon, it is not going to exactly fit up. What we will do is, we'll take some sandpaper, we'll sand it down, and I will show you guys what that looks like right now. Yeah. All right, mortise, tenon, done. We will glue this up. You got a really, really strong joint here. Let's move on. Okay, let's talk about the infamous dovetail. Arguably one of the hardest joints to make is the dovetail, and it's one of the joints you cannot cut out in a machine. This is the one that was cut out in a machine, and the saw left a little bit of that kerf on there and left the gap because of the blade and the thickness. So you have to cut it out using a special dovetail saw. Well, I don't have one of those. I do have a flush trim pull saw that works pretty well. Let's take you through that process. So I have two pieces. I'm only going to do one dovetail. Essentially what you want to do is you want to get a relatively straight line. It's important to get everything perfect on this. So a relatively straight line. Okay. Then let's try to focus on our dovetail and just go out. Now there are special dovetail like jigs and other measurements. I kind of freehand mine. So I am going to cut out, I'm going to leave this intact and cut out these two guys. So, slow and steady always wins the race. Looks like I have a little bit of a curve that I got there, but I can always fix that with a chisel. Dovetails are unique because they're pretty specialized and people take good pride in nice dovetails. And I do kind of too. I don't usually cut dovetails out because I mainly focus on construction. So my dovetails are not the greatest. And I'll be the first to kind of admit that whenever someone asks. All right, let me cut the other one out and we'll get back to it. Okay, so I finally got it cut out. Now I'm going to just trace out the other side. This part will be cut out. Dovetailing is definitely a skill. Okay, I'm gonna cut this out and I'll show you guys the result. Okay, it's done. Fit check here. We're gonna try to see how the fit is. We're gonna take a soft mallet and see if it can convince it to go in. Not the best dovetail, but it holds, it's tight, it's in there, it's cut by hand, and it definitely is better than this guy right here. A little bit of glue, a little bit of sand, you have your dovetail all perfect in there. That's actually my best one I've ever cut so far. All right, let's move on to what I like to call mechanical joints. Okay, the first kind of mechanical joint we are going to talk about are dowels. Now, typically I would just drill straight up into a piece of wood and make dowels, but the issue is that these dowels are not straight into the wood. They're often like curved corners. I'm not super good at drilling straight down, right? Most people are not. That's why we have drill presses, that sort of thing. But the cool part is they make a jig for dowels. I'm not a huge fan of them because it's a little bit more complicated, but that's okay, we'll actually make it work. So what you need to do is, you need to, first step, mark where you want your dowels to be placed. The way I do this is mark on the board so I can match up and mark pretty easily. Then I take that mark and I go over and I kind of bleed it over. That way I get a nice even place where I can hook up my dowel. Then I'll take the dowel jig and I'll look through, I'm gonna do the smallest one. I'll look through the smallest one and I'll find my mark. I tighten it down. Then I take the bit and the collar and I place my collar and I try to give about half the distance, so I push into the actual jig and I try to leave a little bit out so I have kind of some room to put a dowel in, but I don't want the dowel to go completely in. So I tighten the collar around, place on my drill, and I am good to go. Now I'm not super worried about clamping it down. If I had bigger pieces, then yeah, I would clamp it down. But on this one, we just go kind of slow. We have one. Let's get a little dowel so we can check the fit. That's actually pretty good. We want a little bit sticking out. Let's do the other side. We want to check. We look through and we find, I know you guys can't see, but the mark. Drill in. These doweling kits are relatively cheap. You can find them at Home Depot for a relatively cheap price. I'm not a huge fan of them. I've never liked dowels, and I'll kind of explain why here in a moment when I go over the next style of mechanical jointery. I'm just getting this in place. Okay, perfect. Now in a real world, I'm gonna take this apart, so I'm not really going to focus too much. We'll put a little bit of glue, and the glue actually will expand these dowels a little bit and help with the fit. But we place the dowels in, we place our other side in, and from that, we're all set up, and it's actually pretty strong. This allows an extension of the wood so that you have a pretty good extension, or a pretty good rigidity that the wood has. Last, but certainly not least, my absolute favorite joint are pocket holes. The way pocket holes work is essentially a special drill bit that drills down and leaves a little head or an indentation for the head of the pocket hole to actually drill into. We're going to cut up or drill up some pocket holes. Now I'm going to use some piece of the wood. This is a tendon I cut out that you guys saw. I'm going to use the other piece. Now I'm going to go in to this piece right here. I'm going to show you guys how I do it right now. Okay, I'm going to do a whole video on pocket holes, but you guys see me use pocket holes a ton already, and this is probably one of my more favorite kind of joints to use. They use special pocket screws like this style right here, which is a single flathead, or you can have a head that has a washer kind of built into it. Essentially, there's a couple different ways. You can use a jig like this that is all in one. You can set everything good to go, but these are kind of expensive, $100 for a jig. Craig, the company that makes these jigs, or started them, actually makes these single-use jigs, and they're not really single-use, but they're kind of single jigs, and they work fantastic. They basically snap on to wherever you're going to actually drill and make your pocket hole. And all you do is clamp and drill your pocket holes. What makes pocket holes special is going to be this special drill bit right here. You see you have a different head right here, and then it goes into a bigger head and a bigger drill bit that goes through. This gives it that signature kind of pocket hole style. Snaps into really any drill that you have, a impact driver. And it creates that pocket hole, right? Let's make another one real quick. And you only need to do it on one side. You do not need to do it on the other side. This gives a very strong union because it basically allows the face of the wood to be drilled into the face of the other piece right here. So with glue, it becomes very, very strong. You do have to use a long square bit adapter so you can actually reach and get that angle that is required for pocket holes. But from then, your holes are drilled and it's very, very solid. A lot more solid than dowels are. There are other types of manufactured, and they deserve their own video, manufactured joints, and eventually I will be getting a biscuit joiner. These are called biscuits. They are put in with a biscuit joiner, which is a very small circular saw that cuts in these gaps for these biscuits. Biscuit joinery is weird. I have my own opinion on it. I do not like them, but they have their own place and they deserve really their own video, and you will get one of those videos whenever this guy gets delivered to me. Hey, until then, I want to thank you guys for watching. I know this is kind of all over the place. I wanted to show you all the joints that I have and kind of give you guys an idea on what I do and how I join up wood together. So that's all the main wood joints. I mean, I know there's some like box joints or finger joints that we didn't talk about. There's a bunch of other ones. Maybe this video deserves a part 2. If it does, if you like it, you can drop a like, say part 2 in the comments, and I will give you guys part 2. Until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys. Well, that isn't good.